Tomas was a man who spent most of his life studying old maps, broken pieces of pottery, and forgotten stories told by sailors. He was not rich, nor was he famous, but he carried a restless heart. His house in the small coastal town stood near the harbor, where he could hear the sounds of ships, waves, and endless talk of lands far away. Too many, the sailors' stories were only drink-fueled tales meant to pass the night, but to Tomas, they were keys to hidden history. One evening, as the sun fell and the sky turned red, Tomas sat in the corner of a tavern. Round him the smell of fish, salt, and ale filled the air. Sailors gathered at wooden tables, sharing songs and boasting of storms they had survived. Tomas listened quietly, his hand resting on an old notebook. That was when he first heard it. A scarred sailor with one eye leaned across the table to his mates and spoke in a low tone. Deep in the jungle, far beyond the river that no map shows, there is a temple, and in that temple lies a mask of pure gold. But beware, for those who touch it lose themselves. The mask takes the mind, not just the body. The sailors laughed, some shaking their heads, others crossing themselves as if to keep away bad luck. But Tomas did not laugh. He leaned forward, his heart quickening. He had read of golden masks before, objects of kings and priests. They were rare, always tied to ritual and mystery. But this one sounded different. The sailor's words carried both promise and warning. Tomas waited until the group broke apart. Then he stepped to the scarred sailor and offered him a drink. "Tell me," Tomas said in a calm voice, "where did you hear of this mask?" The sailor eyed him carefully, as if measuring his trust. "I was there once." The man finally answered, "I never entered the temple, but I saw its walls, covered in faces carved from stone. The trees grew thick round it, but even through the vines I could see the gold. I left before night, for I knew better than to stay." Tomas asked no more questions. He paid for the sailor's drink, thanked him, and returned to his small house. That night he did not sleep. He opened his old maps, laying them across the table, tracing rivers and mountain ranges with his finger. He searched for places unmarked, spaces where no travelers had gone. The sailor's tale burned in his mind, a golden mask that could rule the mind itself. To Tomas, it was not just treasure, it was history waiting to be uncovered. The next morning, Tomas made a choice. He would not let this chance slip. He would form an expedition. He began by speaking with men in the harbor. Some laughed at him, saying he was chasing a ghost. Others feared the curse. But a few, hungry for gold, agreed to follow. Among them was Raul, a strong man with quick hands, Luis, who could navigate by stars, and Marta, a healer with sharp eyes who carried herbs and calm words. There were others too, simple workers who needed coin to feed families. Tomas promised them wealth, but he also spoke of honor. "If we find the mask, we will not only be rich," he told them. "We will write our names into history. People will remember us." Preparations began. They gathered tools to cut through forest, ropes, and lanterns. They filled crates with dried food and jars of water. Tomas purchased 2 mules to carry supplies. In the town square, some people watched them with curiosity, while others whispered warnings. "The jungle swallows men whole," an old woman said as they passed. But Tomas pressed forward, his eyes full of determination. At night, as the group rested before departure, Tomas sat with Marta near the fire. She asked him, "Do you believe the stories of madness, or do you only hear the part about gold?" Tomas answered slowly, "Stories change with each mouth that speaks them. Perhaps men went mad. Perhaps they were only afraid. I believe in what I saw in that sailor's eyes. He spoke of something real. If there is danger, then it is a danger worth facing." Marta studied him, then nodded. "You are brave. But sometimes bravery and blindness walk side by side." The morning of departure came with bright skies. The town gathered to watch the small band set out. The mules carried heavy packs, and the men carried axes and ropes over their shoulders. Tomas walked at the front, holding the map he had drawn, though much of it was empty space. The road soon left behind the sound of the sea and the comfort of stone houses. It turned into a dirt path leading toward thick green hills. The forest awaited, filled with insects, cries of hidden animals, and a silence deeper than any room. As they entered the trees, Tomas looked back once at the distant town. He knew some thought him foolish, others thought him mad, yet inside his chest burned a fire, stronger than fear. He whispered to himself, "If the mask is there, I will find it." The jungle seemed endless, and they had only begun. The air grew heavier, the path darker, but their spirits remained high, for hope still carried them. None of them yet knew what trials awaited. None of them yet knew how a golden mask could change not only history, but their very minds. The first days of the journey seemed almost easy. The air was fresh, the path wide, and the ground firm under their feet. Birds with bright feathers flew above the trees, and the group walked with laughter. Tomas led from the front, his eyes often on the map he had drawn, though much of the land was unknown. Behind him walked Raoul, carrying an axe across his shoulder, always ready to cut branches or clear fallen trees. Luis followed close, pointing out stars at night and helping guide the way. Marta walked beside the workers, speaking calmly when they grew tired, her bag of herbs swinging at her side. Each night they made camp, fires burned, food cooked, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Tomas shared with them the stories he had gathered from old books and sailors. He spoke of temples built by forgotten hands, of treasures left behind by kings who ruled before history was written. His words filled the men and women with pride. They began to believe that they were not just workers, but part of something greater, something that would be remembered. But the farther they went, the heavier the air became. The jungle was not like the roads near town. The trees grew so tall that the sky was hidden. The ground turned soft with mud, and insects bit their skin. The workers swung their machetes day after day, clearing vines that grew back as if the forest wished to close again behind them. Sweat covered their faces, and their clothes grew damp. Raoul, strong and bold, laughed at the challenges. "This jungle cannot break me," he often said, swinging his axe with sharp strikes. But Luis grew quiet. His eyes searched the trees, and he spoke less at the fires. One evening Marta asked him why. He answered, "The stars guide me, but here the sky hides them. I feel blind under these trees." On the fifth day, they reached a river. Its water was wide, brown with mud, and it moved with strong force. The men cut wood to build a raft, tying it with ropes. Tomas stood at the bank, watching the water flow. He thought of the sailor's words about the river that no map showed. Perhaps this was the same one. His heart beat faster, both with fear and hope. Crossing the river took hours. The raft shook as the current pulled, and the mules cried as they were led across. One of the crates of food slipped into the water, carried away before anyone could save it. Raoul cursed, but Tomas raised his voice. "We will not stop. The river tests us, but we are stronger." His tone carried such strength that even the tired workers felt new courage. After crossing, they moved deeper still. The forest grew darker. Strange cries sounded from the trees at night, cries none of them could name. Once, as the fire burned low, a worker woke screaming, saying he had seen glowing eyes beyond the flames. Raoul rushed into the shadows with his axe, but found nothing. Still, unease settled over the camp. Marta calmed the frightened man with soft words and a tea brewed from herbs. But even she admitted to Tomas that something in the jungle felt wrong. Tomas refused to show fear. He told her, if the mask is truly there, then such trials are to be expected. Gold never lies in open fields. It hides in places men fear. Yet when he lay down to sleep, his own dreams were restless. He saw broken walls covered with vines and faces carved in stone. He heard whispers in a language he did not know. The next morning, Luis spoke of hearing a drumbeat in the distance. No one else had heard it, and Raoul mocked him, saying the jungle was playing tricks. But Tomas did not mock. He wrote the words in his notebook, marking the day and direction. He knew the old stories often spoke in signs, and though many dismissed them, he paid attention. Food grew harder to keep fresh, and their clothes tore on thorns. Yet step by step, the group pressed on. They began to mark trees with cuts so they would not lose their way. Even then, some swore the forest shifted, paths seeming different when they returned. One night, as rain poured, the group huddled under makeshift covers. The fire would not stay lit, and the dark pressed close around them, over the noise of the rain. Tomas thought he heard faint laughter, though no one stood near. He looked at the others. Raoul slept heavily, Louise stared into the shadows, and Marta sat quietly, her eyes sharp. He said nothing of the sound, but it stayed with him. By the 10th day, the group grew weary. The air was thick, and every step felt heavy. But just as their strength seemed to fade, the ground began to rise. They climbed a ridge, and from the top, they looked out. For the first time in days, they saw the sky. Beyond the endless trees lay a valley. In the center of that valley rose a shape half hidden by vines and mist. It was stone, not earth, square and rising high. Tomas felt his heart stop for a moment. He raised his hand and pointed. The temple, he whispered. The workers looked and gasped. Even Raoul, bold and laughing, grew silent. Louis crossed himself, and Marta touched the beads on her wrist. For a moment no one spoke. They all felt both wonder and dread. The golden mask was no longer a sailor's tale. It was real, and it waited for them. Tomas turned to his group. His face was pale from the long march, but his eyes burned with fire. We are close. Our journey is meaning. What lies in that temple will be ours. The group cheered weakly, though some voices trembled deep in their hearts. They felt the weight of what awaited. The jungle had tested them, but the true test had not yet begun. The golden mask waited, and with it, a fate none of them could yet imagine. The first days of the journey seemed almost easy. The air was fresh, the path wide, and the ground firm under their feet. Birds with bright feathers flew above the trees, and the group walked with laughter. Tomas led from the front, his eyes often on the map he had drawn, though much of the land was unknown. Behind him walked Raoul, carrying an axe across his shoulder, always ready to cut branches or clear fallen trees. Louise followed close, pointing out stars at night and helping guide the way. Marta walked beside the workers, speaking calmly when they grew tired, her bag of herbs swinging at her side. Each night they made camp, fires burned, food cooked, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Tomas shared with them the stories he had gathered from old books and sailors. He spoke of temples built by forgotten hands, of treasures left behind by kings who ruled before history was written. His words filled the men and women with pride. They began to believe that they were not just workers, but part of something greater, something that would be remembered. But the farther they went, the heavier the air became. The jungle was not like the roads near town. The trees grew so tall that the sky was hidden. The ground turned soft with mud, and insects bit their skin. The workers swung their machetes day after day, clearing vines that grew back as if the forest wished to close again behind them. Sweat covered their faces, and their clothes grew damp. Raoul, strong and bold, laughed at the challenges. This jungle cannot break me, he often said, swinging his axe with sharp strikes. But Louis grew quiet. His eyes searched the trees, and he spoke less at the fires. One evening Marta asked him why. He answered, "The stars guide me, but here the sky hides them. I feel blind under these trees." On the 5th day, they reached a river. Its water was wide, brown with mud, and it moved with strong force. The men cut wood to build a raft, tying it with ropes. Tomas stood at the bank, watching the water flow. He thought of the sailor's words about the river that no map showed. Perhaps this was the same one. His heart beat faster, both with fear and hope. Crossing the river took hours. The raft shook as the current pulled, and the mules cried as they were led across. One of the crates of food slipped into the water, carried away before anyone could save it. Raoul cursed, but Tomas raised his voice. "We will not stop. The river tests us, but we are stronger." His tone carried such strength that even the tired workers felt new courage. After crossing, they moved deeper still. The forest grew darker. Strange cries sounded from the trees at night, cries none of them could name. Once, as the fire burned low, a worker woke screaming. Saying he had seen glowing eyes beyond the flames, Raoul rushed into the shadows with his axe, but found nothing. Still, unease settled over the camp. Marta calmed the frightened man with soft words and a tea brewed from herbs. But even she admitted to Tomas that something in the jungle felt wrong. Tomas refused to show fear. He told her, if the mask is truly there, then such trials are to be expected. Gold never lies in open fields. It hides in places men fear. Yet when he lay down to sleep, his own dreams were restless. He saw broken walls covered with vines and faces carved in stone. He heard whispers in a language he did not know. The next morning, Louise spoke of hearing a drumbeat in the distance. No one else had heard it, and Raoul mocked him, saying the jungle was playing tricks. But Tomas did not mock. He wrote the words in his notebook, marking the day and direction. He knew the old stories often spoke in signs, and though many dismissed them, he paid attention. Food grew harder to keep fresh, and their clothes tore on thorns. Yet step by step, the group pressed on. They began to mark trees with cuts so they would not lose their way. Back, even then, some swore the forest shifted, paths seeming different when they returned. One night, as rain poured, the group huddled under makeshift covers. The fire would not stay lit, and the dark pressed close around them, over the noise of the rain. Tomas thought he heard faint laughter, though no one stood near. He looked at the others. Raoul slept heavily, Louise stared into the shadows, and Marta sat quietly, her eyes sharp. He said nothing of the sound, but it stayed with him. By the 10th day, the group grew weary. The air was thick, and every step felt heavy. But just as their strength seemed to fade, the ground began to rise. They climbed a ridge, and from the top, they looked out. For the first time in days, they saw the sky. Beyond the endless trees lay a valley. In the center of that valley rose a shape half hidden by vines and mist. It was stone, not earth, square and rising high. Tomas felt his heart stop for a moment. He raised his hand and pointed. The temple, he whispered. The workers looked and gasped. Even Raoul, bold and laughing, grew silent. Louis crossed himself, and Marta touched the beads on her wrist. For a moment no one spoke. They all felt both wonder and dread. The golden mask was no longer a sailor's tale. It was real, and it waited for them. Tomas turned to his group. His face was pale from the long march, but his eyes burned with fire. We are close. Our journey is meaning. What lies in that temple will be ours. The group cheered weakly, though some voices trembled deep in their hearts. They felt the weight of what awaited. The jungle had tested them, but the true test had not yet begun. The golden mask waited, and with it, a fate none of them could yet imagine. The valley was wrapped in heavy mist when the group began their descent. The jungle that had been thick and alive with sound now seemed quiet, almost as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Tomas walked at the front, his eyes fixed on the shadow of stone rising above the trees. Every step forward filled him with both wonder and fear. For so many years he had chased stories, but never before had he stood on the edge of one made real. The ground grew uneven, and roots coiled across their path like great snakes. Raoul cut through them with his axe, sweat running down his arms. Louis followed, his eyes darting to every corner of the forest as if expecting movement. Marta carried her bag close, watching the workers whose faces grew pale from exhaustion and dread. By midday they reached the base of the valley. The mist thinned, and the temple revealed itself. It was larger than any of them expected. The structure rose high, though vines and trees clung to its walls as if trying to drag it back into the earth. The stone steps were broken in places, but their size showed the skill of those who built them. Faces carved in the stone lined the walls. Some smiled, others frowned, and a few looked twisted in silent screams. The workers stood in silence. Even Raoul, bold and fearless, lowered his axe and stared. Louis crossed himself, whispering a prayer. Marta's eyes softened with both awe and unease. Tomas stepped forward, his hands trembling, and touched the stone wall. It was cold and wet, yet strong, as if time itself could not destroy it. This is it, Tomas whispered. The Temple of the Golden Mask. The group climbed the steps. Each footfall echoed in the stillness, though no bird or insect made sound. The silence was thick, pressing against their ears. At the top of the stairs they reached a great doorway, half covered by vines. Together they pulled the vines aside, revealing carvings across the stone frame. The carvings showed figures bowing before a larger figure wearing a mask. Round that figure, smaller shapes were bent low, some with hands raised as if in worship, others lying as if fallen. Raoul frowned. It looks like the people are serving the one with the mask. Marta answered softly, or perhaps they are. Prisoners, not followers. Tomas said nothing. His eyes traced the lines of the carvings, his mind burning with questions. What kind of people built this? What kind of power did the mask hold that made them carve such scenes? They stepped inside. The air was colder than outside, heavy and damp. The light of their lanterns flickered against the walls, showing more carvings, more faces, all staring at them. The floor was smooth stone, though cracked with age. Their footsteps echoed, carrying far into the darkness. The group walked through a long hall that led to a chamber at the center of the temple. At first they thought it was empty, but as the lanterns moved closer, the chamber revealed its heart. On a raised stone altar lay the mask. It shone even in the dim light, its surface of pure gold catching every flicker of flame. The mask was shaped like a human face, but its eyes were long and narrow, and its mouth curved into neither smile nor frown. It seemed alive, though still, as if waiting for someone to place it upon their face. The workers gasped. Raoul stepped closer, his boldness returning. "It is real," he said, his voice filled with awe. Luis, however, pulled back, his hand gripping his chest. "Do not touch it. This is not treasure. It is a curse." Marta stood frozen, her eyes locked on the mask. She felt both drawn to it and terrified of it. Her voice came in a whisper. "It watches us." Tomas moved forward slowly. His hand shook as he reached out. "This is what we came for," he said. "This is history. This is proof." The workers murmured among themselves. Some nodded eagerly at the sight of gold, their minds filled with thoughts of wealth. Others turned away, unwilling to look. The silence of the temple grew deeper as Tomas's hands lifted the mask from the altar. The moment his fingers touched it, the air seemed to grow heavier. The flame of the lanterns bent as if pulled by wind, though no wind was there. The golden surface felt warm, almost like skin. Tomas held it high, his face glowing with triumph. "It is ours," he declared. A wave of unease swept through the group. Luis took a step back. "Put it down, Tomas. Do not keep it." Raul's eyes widened, but not with fear. "With this mask we are rich beyond kings. We will never need to work again." The workers broke into arguments. Some cried out with joy. Others begged Tomas to leave the mask. Their voices rose, echoing against the carved walls until it sounded like 100 people speaking at once. Marta raised her voice above the noise. "Tomas, listen to me. We must leave. Take only what we can carry, but not this. Can you not feel it? It is not meant to be held by us." But Tomas clutched the mask tighter, his eyes burning. For a moment he seemed not to hear her. His lips moved as if whispering to someone unseen. Then he turned, his face pale, but his smile bright. "The mask belongs to us now, to me." The group fell silent. The only sound was the dripping of water from the ceiling. The golden mask glowed faintly in the lantern light, its eyes seeming to stare at each person in turn. They had found the temple. They had found the mask. Yet none felt the triumph they had dreamed of. The air in the chamber carried no joy, only dread. The golden mask waited in Tomas's hands, and with it, a shadow deeper than any of them could yet understand. The chamber of the temple remained silent after Tomas claimed the golden mask. The group stood frozen, each person staring at the shining object in his hands. Its smooth surface caught every flicker of light and reflected it into the eyes of those around him. For a moment no one spoke. It was as if the temple itself was listening. Then Raoul stepped forward. His voice was filled with excitement. "We have done it. We will be rich beyond measure. This mask alone is worth more than the ships in the harbor." Some Of the workers nodded eagerly, their faces glowing with hope. But Luis shook his head, his eyes sharp with fear. No, Raul, look at us already. Look at our minds. Do you not see how it works upon us? The voices, the faces in the trees. It is not gold. It is poison. The workers began to argue. Some shouted for Tomas to put the mask back upon the altar. Others begged him to take it with them. Their voices rose in anger, echoing off the stone walls, until it felt like the temple itself was filled with fighting spirits. Marta tried to calm them. She raised her hands and spoke firmly. Listen, fighting here will destroy us. We must be united. Tomas, set the mask down for now. We can decide together when we have rested. Tomas looked at her but said nothing. His fingers clung tightly to the mask, as if it might be torn from him. His eyes seemed distant, unfocused, as though he were listening to a voice none of them could hear. That night they camped at the edge of the temple. The fire burned, but the shadows seemed thicker than before. Raul sharpened his axe with quick strokes, his eyes fixed often on the golden mask which Tomas kept close by his side. Luis refused to sit near it, choosing instead to keep guard at the far end of the camp. Marta moved between them, trying to ease the rising storm. As the night grew late, whispers carried through the camp. Raul accused Luis of plotting to steal the mask. Luis spat back that Raul's greed would kill them all. The workers muttered that they dreamed of golden faces calling them, even when awake. Marta brewed tea from her herbs, but even she could not ease their restless minds. Suddenly a cry broke out. Raul leapt to his feet, his axe raised. He pointed at Luis and shouted. He tried to take the mask while I slept. I saw him. Luis denied it, swearing he had not moved from his place. The workers rushed between them, holding them apart. Tomas stood slowly, the mask glimmering in his hand. His voice was quiet but heavy. Enough. The mask is not for you to fight over. It is mine to carry. It has chosen me. At his words, silence fell. The fire cracked, and even the wind seemed to stop. Marta stared at Tomas, fear in her eyes. Tomas, listen to yourself. It is not alive. It cannot choose. But Tomas only smiled faintly. His eyes no longer seemed the same. There was a sharpness in them, as though something inside him had changed. The following days grew worse. Arguments spread among the workers. 2 of them refused to march unless Tomas promised to share the mask's wealth. Others whispered that they should leave it behind and save themselves. At night, screams echoed in the camp as men woke from dreams of golden faces surrounding them. Raul grew more violent. He carried his axe even while sleeping, clutching it to his chest. Luis became withdrawn, speaking less each day, though his eyes were always on Tomas and the mask. Marta alone tried to keep them steady, but even her calm words lost their power as fear grew. Tomas seemed both weaker and stronger. His body grew thin, his hands shook, but his voice carried strange authority. When he spoke, the others listened. Even when his words made little sense, sometimes he muttered alone, as if speaking to the mask. At other times he ordered the group to march harder, claiming the temple was not the end but only the beginning. On the 7th night, another tragedy struck. A worker named Diego was found dead near the camp. His eyes were wide open, staring at the sky. Though no wound marked his body, the others whispered that the mask had taken his life. Raul swore it was Luis, striking in secret. Luis denied it with trembling voice, but doubt spread through the camp. Marta knelt beside Diego's still form and whispered a prayer. Then she turned to Tomas. How many more must we lose? Can you not see it? The mask is tearing us apart. Tomas looked down at her, his hands tightening around the mask. His voice was cold. It is not the mask that kills us. It is weakness. Only those strong enough can bear its presence. Diego was not strong. Marta's face hardened, but she said nothing more. The group marched on. But now they were no longer one. They were broken into pieces, each man and woman mistrusting the other. Some followed Tomas blindly, believing the mask would bring them wealth. Others followed out of fear, not daring to leave. A few whispered plans to flee, Though none dared act, the jungle grew dark around them. Paths seemed to shift, streams turned where they had not turned before, and the cries of unseen animals followed them. The temple still stood behind them, but it was as if its shadow reached out, pulling them deeper into madness. One night, as the fire burned low, Marta sat awake. She watched Tomas whispering into the mask, his eyes wide, his lips moving without sound. She shivered and closed her eyes. She had seen sickness before, men lost to fever. But this was something different. It was not only Tomas, it was all of them. The mask had entered their minds, and there was no cure for it. The descent into chaos had begun. The golden mask was no longer just an object of treasure. It was a presence among them, a shadow that walked with them, spoke to them, and slowly made them. The mask had changed everything. What had begun as a journey filled with hope now moved like a shadowed march toward ruin. The men and women who once walked as companions no longer trusted one another. Every word spoken near the fire carried suspicion. Every glance at Tomas and the mask carried hunger or fear. Raul grew restless. He followed Tomas closely, his axe never far from his hand. He told the others that Tomas had been chosen by the mask and that no one should question him. The mask will reward us, he said again and again. Those who doubt will be left behind. His loud voice stirred unease, but none dared to argue with him openly. Luis, once the calm navigator, had become hollow. His eyes carried dark circles, and his voice was low and sharp. He spoke less each day, but when he did, his words were filled with warning. The mask does not belong to us. It belongs to the dead. We carry death with us now. Some listened to him in secret, whispering that he was right, but none dared act while Tomas held the mask so tightly. Marta moved between them like a thin wall keeping water from breaking through. She gave medicine for fever, bound cuts, and tried to keep peace. Yet even she felt the strain each night. She lay awake, listening to the sound of murmurs, cries, and distant whispers that seemed to come not from the forest, but from inside the camp itself. The breaking began quietly. One morning the workers were gone. Their blankets lay empty, their tools left behind. Tracks led away into the forest, but no one followed. Raul claimed they had fled out of weakness. Luis whispered that the forest had taken them. Tomas said nothing, his eyes fixed only on the mask he carried. The next night, another worker tried to slip away. Raul caught him before he could leave and dragged him back, his axe blade pressing against the man's throat. No one leaves. Raul shouted, "We are bound to the mask now. If you turn from it, you turn from us." Fear spread through the camp. The worker begged for his life, and Raul spared him only when Tomas lifted his hand. Tomas spoke in a strange, calm voice. "He may live, but let this be known. The mask chooses who is worthy. The weak will not survive. Only the strong will carry its power." The worker lived, but he never spoke again. He followed orders without word, his eyes empty, his spirit broken by the 10th day after leaving the temple. The expedition was no longer a group of explorers. It was a band divided. Some clung to Tomas, believing his words that the mask would bring them wealth and glory. Others whispered of escape, though fear of Raul's axe and Tomas's growing madness kept them silent. Food grew scarce, the river water was muddy, and sickness spread. Marta worked tirelessly, using herbs to heal the weak, but even she knew her efforts could not save them all. At night, the men dreamed of the mask. Some woke screaming, claiming they saw Tomas standing over them with its golden face staring down. Tomas himself slept little. Often he sat by the fire, the mask resting on his lap, his lips moving in whispers no one understood. On one dark night, the breaking reached its peak. The fire burned low, and the camp was quiet except for the soft sound of the forest. Then a sudden cry split the air. Raul stood, his axe raised high. He accused Luis of plotting to steal the mask. "I saw him watching, waiting for Tomas to sleep," Raul roared. Luis denied it, his voice trembling with both anger and despair. "You are blind, Raul. Tomas is no longer himself. The mask speaks through him if we do not leave it behind. We will all die. The camp erupted in shouts. Some sided with Raoul, others with Louise. Blades were drawn. The workers, once bound by a shared goal, now turned on one another. Marta rushed between them, her hands raised, her voice crying for peace. But her words were drowned in the storm of voices. Then Tomas rose. He lifted the mask high, and the firelight reflected across its golden surface. His eyes glowed with a strange light, his voice deep and commanding. Enough, the mask has spoken. Only the faithful will walk with me. The rest are already dead. Silence fell for a moment, heavy and cold. Raoul dropped to one knee before Tomas, bowing his head. A few others followed, but Louis stood firm, his face pale but unbroken. You are lost, Tomas. The mask has taken your mind. I will not follow you into death. Tomas's eyes narrowed. Then you will not follow at all. Raoul lunged with his axe, but Louis leapt back, the blade missing him by inches. Chaos broke loose. The campfire scattered sparks as men fought, some striking with knives, others with bare hands. Cries filled the night, and blood stained the ground. Marta dragged two of the younger workers away, shouting for them to run. She tried to reach Louise, but the fighting drove her back. She saw him flee into the forest. Raoul chasing close behind. Then the shadows swallowed them both. When dawn came, the camp was broken. Half the group was gone, either dead or vanished. Into the trees. Those who remained sat in silence, their faces hollow. Raoul returned with blood on his axe, but no sign of Louise. Tomas sat by the fire, the mask clutched to his chest, his eyes burning with fever. He whispered to himself, his lips curling into a strange smile. Marta looked at him with sorrow. She knew the Tomas she had once trusted was gone. The mask had taken him, and with him, the expedition itself. All that remained was a broken band, wandering in the jungle, led by a man who was no longer fully his own. The breaking of the expedition was complete. The golden mask had done what no storm, beast, or hunger could do. It had turned friends into enemies, hope into despair, and leaders into shadows of themselves. And yet, despite the ruin, Tomas marched on, claiming the mask had shown him a path forward. He said it whispered of a place deeper in the forest where true power waited. Those who still followed him did so not from faith, but from fear. The rest, Marta included, knew only one truth. The mask would not lead them home. It would lead them into darkness. The jungle had swallowed them whole. Days turned into weeks, and the expedition was no longer a proud march of explorers, but a thin line of broken souls. Stumbling forward, Tomas led them with the golden mask always in his hands. His face was pale, his eyes dark, but his voice carried a strange power that kept the rest from turning away. Marta watched him with sorrow and fear. She remembered the Tomas who once spoke of knowledge, of history, and of bringing honor to their land. That man was gone. Now he spoke only of the mask, of visions it showed him, of temples waiting to be uncovered. He said the forest itself bent to its will. Some of the men nodded when he spoke, but she saw in their eyes that they no longer believed. They were too afraid to stand against him. Raoul remained his closest shadow. His axe never left his side, and his loyalty to Tomas was like iron. He no longer spoke as a man, but as a guard for the mask. When others grew weak or muttered about turning back, Raoul silenced them with a single look. Two men who had tried to slip away one night never returned, and their fate was clear without words. Food was nearly gone. They chewed bitter roots and drank water that made their stomachs burn. Marta did what she could with herbs, but she knew it would not be enough. Each night more of them coughed, more of them shook with fever. Still, Tomas pressed on, claiming the mask was guiding them to a place of power, a hidden heart of the jungle, where all their suffering would be repaid. One night, Marta dreamed of a great hall deep beneath the earth. She saw walls covered in carvings of kings and gods, and in the center stood a figure wearing the golden mask. But when she drew close, the figure was not Tomas, it was death itself. Waiting with open arms, she woke with tears on her face, her heart filled with dread. The next morning, the expedition reached a valley surrounded by cliffs. At the base of the cliff stood ruins, older than any they had yet seen. Tall stones carved with faces rose from the ground like teeth in a staircase, led down into darkness. Tomas raised the mask high, his voice breaking with joy. "This is it. This is where the mask has led us." The men stared at the ruins with fear. None wanted to enter. But Raoul stood tall with his axe, and so they followed. Marta walked at the back, her hands shaking. She prayed silently that this would end before more lives were lost. Inside the ruins, the air was cold and heavy. Torches lit the way as they moved deeper into the earth. The walls were covered in carvings of the mask, always the mask, shown on the faces of kings, warriors, and priests. At the center of the great chamber stood a stone altar, black with age. Tomas placed the mask upon it, his hands trembling, his eyes shining with wild light. "The mask has returned to its throne," he whispered, "and we are chosen to witness its glory." But the chamber was not silent. A sound rose from the walls, a low hum that grew louder, echoing in their bones. The torch flames flickered, and the air grew colder still. The men clutched their arms, shivering with fear. Marta felt her knees weaken as a weight pressed upon her chest. Raoul knelt before the altar, bowing his head, but the others stepped back, their fear great. One man shouted that they should leave, that the place was cursed. Raoul rose with his axe, ready to strike him down. But before he could, Tomas cried out. The mask had lifted from the altar. No hands touched it, yet it rose into the air, spinning slowly, glowing with a golden light. The hum became a roar, shaking the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the men screamed. Tomas reached for it, his arms wide, his face filled with longing. "It is mine. The mask has chosen me." Marta tried to pull him back, but Raoul shoved her aside. Tomas grasped the mask, pressing it to his face. For a moment, silence returned. The light dimmed, and the mask settled on his skin as if it belonged. Then his scream tore through the chamber. He fell to his knees, clawing at his face. The mask did not come off. It melted into him, fusing with his flesh. His eyes glowed with golden fire. His voice twisted into something inhuman. I see the power. I see the end." The men fled in terror, running toward the staircase. Raoul alone remained. Though even he trembled, Marta tried again to reach Tomas, but the figure that rose before her was no longer the man she had known. His body shook with power, his hands stretched out, and the carvings on the walls seemed to move in answer. The stone faces opened their mouths in silent screams. Marta knew then that the mask had never been a treasure. It was a curse, a prison, of ancient power, waiting for a host. Tomas had become that host. She cried out to Raoul, "We must end this. He is lost. The mask has taken him." Raoul looked at Tomas, his eyes torn between loyalty and fear. At last, with shaking hands, he lifted his axe, but before he could strike, Tomas raised his hand. A wave of unseen force struck Raoul, throwing him against the wall with a sickening crack. He lay still, his axe clattering to the ground. Marta felt the same force pulling at her, but she dropped to her knees and prayed. She prayed not for herself, but for Tomas, for the men who had died, for the souls that the mask had claimed. The air shook around her, but still she prayed. And then, for a moment, the golden fire in Tomas's eyes flickered. His face twisted, with pain, as if the man inside him still fought to be free. "Marta," he whispered, his voice breaking, and Marta saw Raoul's axe near her hand. She grasped it, her heart heavy, her tears falling. With a cry, she rushed forward and struck. The blade cut deep, and the golden fire burst in a blinding flash. When the light faded, Tomas lay still, the mask shattered into pieces beside him. The chamber grew silent, the hum gone, the weight lifted. Marta dropped the axe and fell beside him, her body trembling. The survivors who had fled slowly returned, their faces pale. They saw the broken mask and the fallen leader, and none spoke. Together they carried Tomas out of the ruins, leaving the shattered pieces of the mask behind. The jungle was quiet as they climbed from the valley. No whispers followed them, no shadows stirred in the trees. but their hearts carried scars that would never fade. Marta knew the expedition had found no treasure, no glory. They had found only a warning. Some things are not meant to be taken, not meant to be woken. The golden mask had driven them to madness, and in the end, it had claimed almost all of them. As the survivors made their way back toward the river, Marta looked once more at the jungle behind her. She whispered a final prayer for Tomas and for the others lost. Then she turned her face forward. The mask was gone, but its memory would remain forever, a shadow on their lives. A tale of how greed and pride had led them into darkness. And so, the expedition ended. The golden mask lay in ruins, but its curse lived on in the hearts of those who had seen it. They would never forget the madness it brought, nor the price it demanded.